Hello and welcome to Behind the Pixels. This is the series where I get to sit down with game makers, pick their brains about their process, explore what actually goes into making a game, and learn more about the people behind it all. Now, you might recognize my guests today. Both are long-standing content creators in the world of gaming on YouTube, and they've teamed up to start making a game of their own, so let's bring them in. Thanks for joining me today, guys. These are the two founding members of Ophidian Interactive. I'll let you two both introduce yourselves, tell the viewers who you are, your handle if you go by one, and maybe how they might know you.
Hello. I guess I'll start. My name's Dave. On YouTube, I go by Dave Control. I worked for GameSpot for, I think, like 7 years, if you include Universe, which is their entertainment side. But in a lot of places, Dave Control is probably where I'm best known. At the Dave Klein on handles. There you go.
And I'm Alan, and I've worked with game theory, food theory, film theory. I'm a UX designer by trade and artist by hobby. The Alan Baker is where you can find me on Instagram. And I think it might be something similar to that for everything else, but Instagram's usually where I'm hanging out, so.
Now, I've been a fan of the game theorists for a long time, a decade or more, and although I didn't see your face back then, Alan, it was almost a decade ago that I was introduced to Dave from both of his appearances on Hot Pepper Gaming.
Oh, wow.
And also playing the part of a very Diddy Kong-looking Abu on a couple of the Game Grumps episodes of Table Flip. For anyone out there that may have missed any of these Dave Control moments, I highly recommend going to check them all out. I'll make sure to post the links in the comments. They are so funny.
I look back at that Game Grumps one, and I'm like, I don't know. I think a lot of people hated me in that. I didn't think I did a good job, so I appreciate it. Thank you. I think like the Hot Pepper ones, those I'm proud of. But like, that's just funny. It's like weird. You never know when someone sees your content first. That's really cool.
Well, on the topic of YouTube, it was this platform that allowed the two of you to connect. Alan, can you walk us through how the connection between you and Dave first started?
So I had sort of just recently started a YouTube channel of my own. I'd had a couple before, but this one I wanted to do comparisons with like video game content, or I guess media content in general, and then took at designs of monsters and things like that and look at their cultural counterparts. And I kind of analyzed all this stuff. And so one of the episodes that I did was on, I think it was the axe armor from Symphony of the Night. And I was trying to figure out the origins of the axe armor. And I came across Dave's channel, and he had a Symphony of the Night episode that he had done on his Super Show. And I was like, hey, this is like super unorthodox and like really bad taste in YouTube culture, but like I got a video that I think would really complement your video. Do you mind if I post it in the comments? And he watched it, and I sent it over to him and stuff. He watched it and was like, yeah, sure, why not? And then I think from that point on, we just sort of stayed in touch. And eventually I was doing some YouTube thumbnails for him, and we just kept in contact through the years.
Alan, or I think I started, right? Because like I think I was the one who reached out to you about it because I wanted art on one of my Super Shows, and I was working on a James Bond video for GameSpot at the time. So I asked Alan if he could make that for me, and obviously, like paid him for it. But it turned out great. And then from there, he made some more thumbnails for me. And then from there, Alan approached me, and he was the one who was like, he'd shown me before he tried making a game in the past, which you can talk on, but like,
yeah.
And you tried making it with other people, and then you asked me if I wanted to do it. And I was like, actually, yes, basically.
And funny enough, this interview wouldn't even be happening if not for a comment that I left on one of Dave Control's videos. The one where he introduced a trailer for the game we're here to talk about today. I want to take a moment to play that trailer so folks can check it out before we dive any deeper. Now, for an alpha trailer, this is already looking really solid, but before we get into the meat of the interview, can you both share your individual roles on this project?
No, no, I'm kidding. Yeah, so I am the co-creative director along with Dave. We are both the founders and the creative directors for this project, and I also am the one responsible for pretty much every visual that you see. One thing that I am very proud of about ChivalBee is that it is all drawn by hand, frame by frame. Like everything is done. It's pixel art, so I'm using a program called Sprite, but all done by hand, and I'm really, really happy about that. So everything you're looking at here in this trailer is all done by me. Even though it's in sort of an alpha state here, it's coming along. It's looking really nice, and I'm pretty happy about that. VFX, sound effects, anything that's basically part of that sort of I guess the visual or audio media side of things. I'm kind of taking the reins on that one. Not to include music though. I'm not doing the music. So
I'm the, as Alan said, co-creative director. I guess all the programming is me, so I programmed everything. Or, I mean, I do a lot of lectures and tutorials too, so it's not necessarily like I came up with every line of code. Some of it will be like, oh, this is an interesting line that I learned from a lecture, and I'll kind of put it in and then readapt it based on the rest of the coding. Some of it's all like whatever code I came up with on my own as I was just thinking about how to solve a problem. But anyway, the point is all the programming is on me, all the coding. I feel like everything else that we do, even though I have a bit more of a hand in some ways and like the game design a little bit, but it's still like very much both of us because I'm just a little more used to using Unity at this point. So a lot of times I'll be the one going in there and making little tweaks, but Alan definitely does that a lot. And a lot of times when we come up with enemies and how they should act, even though I might implement it into code and test it out and get it working and all that and make it so like, oh, it'll read the character this way or whatever. Alan and I usually write out together, oh, this is how we want an enemy to act or a boss to act. This is going to be its different attack states. This is what it's going to do. And sometimes Alan will draw out visually how it should be before I go ahead and implement it. So it's definitely like both of us together for that. But I think the only thing I'm solely doing on my own is programming that we're not doing unified and together.
All right, well, now that we've got a sense of who's doing what, let's hear the elevator pitch. Alan, what is ChivalBee?
Okay, so I did a great deal of thinking on what an elevator pitch for this would be, and I'll say that ChivalBee is a mascot platformer that is inspired by a handful of older, like nostalgic era games that sort of acts like a Metroidvania mixed with Mega Man is how I would kind of call it. It's kind of like an open aspect to it. There's a few like light RPG elements to it, but at its core, it's still very much like a mascot platformer that you'd be used to with like Sonic or Mario, something to that extent, I would say. I mean, I think maybe a simpler way to put it is like our kind of motto for Ophidian Interactive has been innovating nostalgia. And that's, I think, kind of what this game is for us. You know, it's like this full of classic things that you've maybe seen in like older games, but we're bringing them into like a modern kind of framework and innovating on things that have already existed in ways that we think would be really fun for people to play.
My elevator pitch is, do you like bouncing? We got bouncing. Bounce off of things. Yeah. There you go. That's my elevator pitch.
You want bouncing and spinning? Here you go.
It's very inspired by, and if anyone plays Symphony of the Night, it's very inspired by, Alan and I both love Symphony of the Night, as we were talking about Castlevania earlier, and it's very inspired by the mechanic in Symphony of the Night when you unlock the ability to dive kick down, and he can kind of do it at a slight angle or straight down and bounce off of enemies. And Alan and I both found that we play keep off of the ground, essentially, like the floor is lava in Castlevania Symphony of the Night, bouncing off of candles or enemies. And it's a lot of fun to do in that. And it's kind of like, we were already working on this project and coming up with mechanics for it. We're like, oh yeah, that's a really fun mechanic. We should work on that and evolve that mechanic. So a lot of it is based around that idea and mechanic. And a lot of the levels we're going to be working on are exploring that in different ways. So this stage that you see right here is the prologue stage, or what's going to be the prologue stage, a very alpha version of it. It'll look much better too. Like, as you can see, there's no backgrounds in places. Some of the backgrounds are placeholders. It's all like auto laid out, so the tile sets are going to be much nicer looking. But point is that like this is really just the stage that we're teaching mechanics, so it's not like really fully playing with the mechanics the way that we intend to.
And Dave, the bee character, that was originally your brainchild, right?
It was kind of just like for fun. I was like, well, there's this game I always wanted to make with it when I was a kid called Buzzbee, where you play as a bee. And in my mind as a kid, I didn't have it at all developed. It was just like, oh, you play as a bee, and he has a laser gun in one hand and a sword in the other hand. So no laser gun in this. It's very undeveloped. It was just like you play as a bee named Buzzbee. That's like really where we took it. And then it's like, okay, as a prototype concept. And then Alan made some art around it that as it evolved just became really great, and it became its own thing. And so Alan completely did the art on his own. It had nothing to do with my concept other than just being a bee. So it's like very much Alan's art from there. So I don't want to take credit for anything visually that Alan did with Buzzbee.
It was very, it was an interesting like kind of situation that sort of happened with that. Because I think I was just trying to figure out what this character would look like. And I had this, I don't know what happened, but I had this idea for like a Three Musketeers kind of thing. And so I was like, all right, well, let's give the bee a sword. And then I just drew some other background characters and stuff on the side. And there was a sketch that I had, I think it's actually one of the ones that I'd sent you. And it's got the three B characters in like a pencil drawing. And that's what I said to Dave. And I was just like, Dave, what do you think of this? And he was just like, keep cooking, you know, like, I was like, all right, I'll keep going. And then that kind of led into it going from just, you know, the bee with the laser gun to having a sword. And then we talked about the Symphony of the Night thing and the bounce mechanic, and that got incorporated into there. And like, so as we were going, this like prototype platformer game that we were making kind of took on this life of its own, where we were just like, we actually have something kind of cool here. Let's see where this goes. And we kept pulling on that thread.
I mean, I guess we'll see when we finish, but it was like with Alan's art and the bee, it's such a strong, at least in my opinion, and maybe I'm biased, but like the art is so strong with that bee character. It feels like, it's a little bit. I mean, it genuinely feels like a strong mascot. Mechanically speaking, as we were designing that initial prototype stuff that you have as well, that we sent you, it was like, wait, this actually feels really fun to play too. So we kind of realized, like, hold on, like it's a great character design and it's really fun to play. Maybe this should be our first game. So
let's shift to style. Alan, was pixel art a practical decision or more of a creative challenge you set for yourself?
That's an excellent question. And we tried to do a couple of different things. I love this. So initially, our first thought was to do this in hand-drawn animation a la Cuphead. And I did a test version of that to see how it would look if we wanted to pursue that route. And it was interesting because it looked fine. It looked really good. I thought it looked great. It was like I just did like an idle pose, but the amount of work that it would take for everything to be drawn out that way, and the way that I would want to do it is I would want to avoid like puppet animation and stuff like that. So I didn't want it to feel cheap or anything. Not that is like not an option. I know some games elect to do that, and that's fine. But that's just not the vision that I had for this. If I was going to do this and do the animation for it, I wanted to do it frame by frame by myself, like by hand and everything. So that led us into pixel art, where it's just kind of like this very viable option, where you can create essentially hand-drawn animation, although it's, you know, and it's a very like, at this point, I think when people see pixel art, they just kind of associate it with just like Nintendo or, you know, like old school, I guess. And I felt like that was also kind of like in line with where I am as like a person who's grew up with games and wanted to make games and all that. It's like, you know, a lot of clean animation, a lot of frames going in some of these pieces. And at the same time, just looking at it kind of harkens back to, you know, 32-bit Sega Genesis kind of stuff, and it was just kind of like a fun thing for me to work on.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was more just like a mix of both like practical, because we both were like, oh my God, like something like Hollow Knight will look so cool. But then practically speaking, as you briefly touched on, this isn't our full-time job. So like practically, it was like, okay, well, Pixar art takes a little bit less time. And at the same time, we are doing a nostalgia-based game, and we both grew up with this style of art, resonates with us. So I think it was a big bit of both.
I just gotta say, for being pixel animation, it's super impressive. You usually think of pixel art as kind of simple or limited, but the stuff you've done here feels really fluid. There's way more motion and expression than what we used to get back in the 90s, the stuff we're nostalgic for.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I really wanted to hit hard was making sure that things felt like they had mass to them, like weight. And so in Busby's, like even just his idle animation, you could see his head kind of bopping around a little bit, and you kind of feel like there's this kinetic motion. Yeah, there you go. So he has his head dipped down a little bit. I know one that I was really proud of was when the snail worm boss at the end of the prologue stage slams its shell pieces down on the ground. That impact was a lot of weight. I wanted to make sure that as a player, you kind of felt the weight of that. And that's kind of been like the driving thing here, even in this animation. Like, it's just like, how much weight can I convey when something strikes or when it moves around? Like, it really, having volume, having mass, I think makes a big difference versus just drawing something or animating something and kind of, making it feel flat by not including those things.
The world you've built looks so bright and fun and super colorful. Alan, can you talk about the inspirations behind the art direction and the world design?
The inspiration for some of the styles and everything like that kind of come from looking at all kinds of different source materials to be like, I can't think of a single one. Like one of the ideas that I had was sort of like a Bloodborne inspired thing, which you look at, ChivalBee, and then you look at Bloodborne and they're like night
There's
and day.
the Three Musketeers drawing, by the way. Sorry.
Yeah, that's it. And so, yeah, so there's not really like a particular artist that I'm looking for. I kind of developed this style for it. And you could see it in some of like the final, like, polished art that you see with the colors and stuff, where every lighting, all the shading has sort of like this jagged, like edge to it, where you might see like it hook up and stuff like that. And that was actually because of the brush I was using in Photoshop, tapers a certain way. And whenever I was coloring in ChivalBee, when I was coloring in Busby, I just kind of flicked my wrist up and it just happened to like line up perfectly and it had this triangular edge and stuff. And it kind of worked with like the conical legs and the geometric shaped body parts and stuff. And I was like, hold on, we got something here. And so then from that point on, I kind of just used that as my shadow and lighting. And I'll walk it back one thing. I will say that in some of the earlier sketches that you see here that are drawn in by pencil, you'll see like a lot of hash lines and a lot of texture lines and stuff. And Dave Raposa is one of my heroes in the art world. And I learned a lot from him about using like little textured lines and stuff to show that there's something happening there. So it kind of breaks up the monotony of like a flat surface. But with that being said, all of the character designs and, stylistic choices and stuff like that, like it's a collaborative effort. So, whenever I make something, I'm like, hey, Dave, what do you think of this? And then he'll shoot his ideas back at me. And so even though, he's doing the programming, I'm doing the art, like we still make sure that we send whatever we're working on to each other to get the feedback and get our ideas.
Yeah, I'm always like, no, do it again, no. No,
he's a regular
Kubrick. And ultimately, the way we have it set up is like, yeah, like as Alan said, I'll give feedback on things, or especially if Alan has a lot of different designs for something that we're coming up with, like 5 different ideas, I'll like weigh in and be like, oh, I like this one or this one for this reason. But ultimately, just to help with like the fact that it's a collaboration, 2 different people. If it's art related, Alan always gets to have the final say. So. And I'm kicking and screaming all the time. No, it's so you know, it's just like it makes it a good working relationship in that sense. Where like it's nice. I get to have input as well, of course, but Alan will always get that final say since that's his realm way more than mine.
Also, while we're on the subject of the game's style and creative direction, if you're watching and want to keep up with everything these guys are building, be sure to follow them. You can find Alan and Dave individually on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and if you want to follow the game's development directly, Ophidian Interactive is on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube, and all over the place. I'll have links to everything down in the description. All right. Let's get back to it. All right, next question. This is the first full game either of you have worked on. What resources have you been leaning on to figure out where to start and how to navigate the process?
I can start with that if you want, Alan.
Yeah, go for
it. For me, because I'm doing all the programming, it's a lot of nonstop Udemy lectures. I really like GameDev.tv. They have their own site. They're also on Udemy. They have a lot of really great courses for starting to learn and a fun Discord community that's been really helpful when I have questions as well, where like general programming questions in Unity, people are super kind and helpful. And then from there's some other great Udemy courses that I found, which I kind of want to look up so I can shout out. But that's like, if you want to start something, just at least like learning Unity, Game Dev TV is a really great starting point. And then there's a lot of other stuff that go more in depth to things that you're going to need to know in terms of if you're going to be doing programming, like go more in depth for like proper programming techniques. Game Dev has some of that, but like they're great for beginner stuff. And yeah, like that's a great resource for programming. I highly recommend that stuff for learning how to program and just getting started and just start making things.
Yeah, and for me, a lot of what I'm doing, it just sort of comes back to looking at other artists and what they've done with their pixel work. Pinterest has been very useful for that, to be honest. A little harder these days with all the AI stuff that's on there, but especially whenever I was first coming up with the like initial, what shading kind of stuff should I use? How should I do the lighting? How many colors is too many colors? Things like that. For things that are like 32 by 32 pixels, it's, a single pixel makes a big difference. And so there's that. There's also, oh God, what is his name? Adam C. Eunice. If you've heard of him, he is doing a game, and he's been working on it for a long time, but he has some great tutorials that I watched early on. And he actually had the tutorial that I followed to help me learn how to use the level layout program called Tiled. That's what we're using to build out the stages. And if I didn't have that video, I don't know if we'd be using Tiled today, but he did a very good job on selling it and explaining how it worked and how it can be utilized. So between Dave and myself, what I think you find here is that we have like this smorgasbord of different things and different people who have already done these things with different experiences. And what we're doing is sort of picking apart different parts of them and then making something our own. It kind of reminds me a lot of like when you're learning how to do like your own style or whatever in art. It's usually just an amalgamation of like your 3 favorite artists and then like this shading technique or stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting how even though it's a game, it still follows the same rules as most visual design laws or habits or whatever you want to call them.
So the other 2 people I want to shout out real quick, by the way, Game Dev TV is great for Udemy. If anyone wants to learn on Unity stuff, Game Dev TV is great. I also highly recommend Alex Dev and Sunny Valley Studio. They have some really great courses for 2D specifically. And I actually, what Alan was saying, I actually recoded the game 3 times entirely. So it completely recoded everything based on taking more tutorials and learning more. And being like, oh, I'm doing this wrong, or this person had a better idea. Let me recode the game because I think this is way better and will help me in the long run. Kind of with that smorgasbord thing that Alan was talking about. And then I'll see something from them and be like, oh, that's a cool idea. Let me take this piece of that concept and see how I can incorporate that into how we're handling things. So
So most of this is getting built in Unity, right? Are there other programs incorporated into the Unity build? Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So like what you're seeing here in the video, essentially, this would be pretty standard for me. I use Visual Studio is what I use to code, which is works in tandem with Unity. And that's, I mean, there's different coding things that you can use that are compilers to write code, and it compiles it, sends it to Unity. Unity will hook up to that, and then it has its own compiler that gives you errors. So then you can send things to like the Unity logs as you're testing things. That's for coding. What you see with this boss that I was showing you, this part's that's on screen right now were the little things that we're showing where the player is, were player detectors that I coded. But there's also a program called Playmaker that we downloaded, where Playmaker, to our understanding, is what Hollow Knight uses. And it's a visual scripting language where you can connect the little nodes and things like that, kind of like what you're seeing here for this dialogue script at the top. And you saw it earlier, but you connect all these nodes and you're also writing things in those nodes. And it's a program that was written for Unity that you can purchase and then use in your game as long as you purchase the license to use it, which are pretty cheap. So we purchased a license for Playmaker. And technically, I could use it for the entire game and code, like create the whole entire game that way. But I like hand coding things because it's easier for me to debug something that I hand coded myself. But Playmaker makes it easier to do a lot of more really complex things, and that's where people might like visual scripting stuff. And Unreal Engine uses blueprints, and I've been teaching myself Unreal Engine lately. And Playmaker is very similar to blueprints, which is what Unreal Engine uses, which is a visual scripting language that's built in to Unreal Engine. And it's kind of like you're using visual scripting in tandem with code. And when you use them both together, it's really powerful. So that's what I'm using for our bosses at the moment is Playmaker. And then Tiled, which is right here, is another system somebody created that Alan mentioned. It's a separate program entirely, but it's been built in a way where it can be imported into Unity. And then when you update something in Tiled, it will automatically update in Unity, which is really cool. There's another extension that we bought and downloaded called Dialogue System by Pixel Crushers, which is what we're using to do the dialogue. And people will do this because it just saves a lot of time, because I could create my own dialogue system and code everything by hand. But A, I know I'm probably not as good of a programmer as somebody who made that extension. And then B, there's other things that I just don't know how to do yet. Like, let's say we're able to one day, like the dream would be to be able to release the game in other regions. And then we have to make, think about like all the dialogue. How are we going to make the dialogue in all these different languages? I don't know how to do that outside of Unity, but the dialogue system already has it built in. So it just makes that sort of thing a lot more simple, as long as you have to learn how to use their tool, but then it can save a lot of time in the long run, and probably a lot of bugs too. So yeah, like all these places like Unity and Unreal Engine have shops that you can go to where you can purchase things like that. So it's like purchasing an asset. You can purchase music, right? And it comes with the license when you purchase it for your game. You can purchase art assets, or you can purchase these tools that are developer tools as well. And that's what some of this stuff is.
Yeah, and there's also on the visual side of things, there's programs that I've been using.
There's that initial Busby animation you're talking about.
Oh yeah, there it is, the little hand-drawn guy.
Yeah.
We have, I told you, Sprite is what I'm using for all of the pixel animations, backgrounds. Actually, you're looking at it right here. And that's been very, very, very useful. This game would not be possible without this program, so... Then there's also things like Juice Effects, Sprite Mancer. That's kind of what we're looking at right here, where I could take like an asset that I've already created. So what you're looking at here is actually just a PNG of the little the bullet, and then I put it into here, and I can use these nodes to create animations based off of that, and then I can export those as a sprite sheet, and then import those into Unity, and then we can see how it looks like in the game, adjust the speed of rotation and all that stuff. And it's just a simple matter of like clicking export once you get the node set up.
So sprite sheets have been around since the early days of gaming. Are they still standard for animation in Unity, or are there more modern tools people are using now?
Yeah, and we could do animations in Unity and just pull in the individual pieces of it. So like, let's take for example Busby's idle. He's got like the head bob, he's got the body, the arms, and the legs, and then his shoulders and his wings. All of those things would be imported as like separate like parts basically in Unity, and we would animate it in there if we wanted to do it that way. However, what I find that's like not there's pros and cons to everything. What I find that just kind of works better in the way that we're going with the sprite sheets is that whenever I need to make a change to something, I can just do it right here, hit save. It's already in the folder in Unity, and that animation's now completely updated. And so instead of having to go back and make movements or adjustments, timing, whatever the case may be within Unity, I just come back to the file, I just move a piece, I hit save, and it's just boop, done. Very similar to how tiled works, where once you change like the level layout, you just hit save. Yeah. It's already in Unity. When you click on Unity, it just adjusts.
Yeah, and Unity's really set up for sprite sheets too. It's like any lecture I do, anything that I've ever done learning about sprites and animated sprites always comes with sprite sheets. It just seems to be the default. And Unity's also gotten good at packaging sprite sheets in a way too, where when it creates the game, it will smush all the sprites together, so it gets rid of that dead space, essentially, in a sprite sheet, and like move them or rotate them around and save the addresses of things, so that way,
kind of like a UV map.
Yeah. So like it really like compress and save things even better. Something else I want to mention too, there's like a part of this video, and I don't know if you're controlling it or you can play it, but there's a part where you see that like, go back to that part where you see the really early development stage, and on the left hand there's like a spider web. I think that'd be kind of like, that's animation related.
Oh yeah. That right
so,
there.
Okay, so right here, so on the left hand side, if you pause the video, on the left hand side of that video, that spider web's what's called the animator. And that's how Unity can read and tell, like, how do I go to which animation? How do I choose the animation to go to? And this is the built-in Unity version called Animator. So that's used for all the animations. And I also want to say for anybody watching who's making a game, my animator doesn't look like that anymore. That was one of like 3 versions of my code ago. So it's way cleaner. That's also why I wanted to call it out. It doesn't look like crap like that anymore. So that was like when I was first learning.
Spider web anymore.
Well, I mean, it can if it gets really complex, and I think it depends. I think 3D stuff can end up looking a lot more complex, but it still shouldn't look that bad. But I mean, this was before I knew how to do things, and that was just from like early lectures and tutorials. So as I learned more, I learned how to properly do it in code better, which really cleans up all those connections. Because essentially what that spider web is the way that I'm coding everything is what's called a state system way to code things. And I didn't know how to do that. I didn't even know that existed when I first started this game. And what a state system is in terms of coding is that if a character is an idle, that's the state they're in. It always behaves like an idle, always. So you write like an idle state essentially as a code block. And then you have, running. It always behaves this way. This is what running always does. And that's a code block essentially. And you write the way that you pop out of idle or leave idle or enter, like in idle itself. You don't have to say how you enter it because you're already in idle, but how do you leave idle? And that's like written into it basically. How do you leave the running state? It's written into it in a sense. Like there's other like things interacting with this, so you leave states. But within that state, I'm like, okay, you play this animation in this state, so I don't need to have that web. And what that web was kind of mimicking before was like, like if you press this button, then you move, and when you leave, it has to go to this animation. When you enter it, something goes to this animation. That's what that giant web to the left is. Before I understood the state system and how to use it properly. It basically is a state system, but just for animation. And that's kind of like how my code would look in a way if you were to like untangle my code. But it's much cleaner. And code-wise, it's written very clean, but that's kind of like what the code is doing. So the animator itself can be way cleaner looking. But anyway, since it's animation and we're talking about art and all that, I thought it might be interesting to point that out. And also, save me, people are looking at this. This is the earliest prototype that we had. So like I promise, it's way, way better than that. And so
Okay, well, next topic. When it comes to world building, not just visually, but narratively, what's been your process for developing the story and lore? And which typically comes first for you, the story or the game mechanics?
I'll take the first one on this one. I think a lot of it has to do with deciding what we want the thing to have in it. So like if we're talking about a level, then we need to figure out like what it needs to have. So our first thing that we did was look at level diversity and figure out, okay, we need a level that has this kind of thing, this kind of thing, that kind of thing. So that way there is something that's memorable about each stage. And from that point, I think is whenever, at least for me, I start going like, okay, well, why is it doing that? Why does it look like this? Why is, why are these people here? I just start asking the question why until I can't answer it anymore. And that's generally how I start to develop the lore around things. And yeah, it's just sort of like, okay, why is this? Honestly, there was a joke that Dave and I had made where we have this like really cute art style and everything's kind of fun and bouncy and stuff, but like the lore that there's like a legitimate like Wikipedia that we started in we use ClickUp for our project management. Nice. And you can make these information like knowledge bases and stuff. It's like legit like a Wikipedia where you can click on lore, this level, this is the description, this is what's going on. It's like a whole thing.
That's awesome.
And it does get altered around based off of like new information that comes in, because we might have a new character that we're like, hey, we kind of want this person to be important. Where can they fit in? And we may have written something one way before. And then we're just like, all right, well, we'll nix that. And we might use this idea for something later. Let's throw him in here now. How does that affect the rest of the landscape? And we'll kind of just do like a quick reassessment of the world and the things happening in it.
Yeah, it's a lot of iterations. And then also to your question, I think about like order of things. It's, mostly it's gameplay first, but sometimes we'll have an idea like Alan was saying with like the why stuff where it's like, oh, that's an interesting story element. And then it goes into like, oh, wait, we can do the gameplay around it this way. That'd be really cool. So it kind of works in tandem like that. So, sometimes the story kind of serves the game in some ways, and sometimes the game is what serves the story. So I think it's like a lot of back and forth. Like a very strong thing to me, gameplay-wise, was every single stage had to very much stand out gameplay-wise and be very different. So they each had a reason to exist. So like the fungal forest that you're seeing there is going to essentially be the super bouncy stage because everything's like makes you bounce. That's like the conceit of that stage. But not just that. The other thing was that I thought like, okay, we should have it so there's a lot of vertical traversal. How can we make bouncing make you go vertical specifically? Not just bouncy, but like a lot of vertical up and down. So that kind of service, like, okay, we're doing that. And then Alan came up with like a really interesting backstory for the fungal forest. So like, oh, how's it connected to the area? How does it do that? And then that led to us introducing other characters. We're like, oh, maybe this band would be here. Maybe these types of characters would be here. And that started to inform which characters were there. It was kind of informed by the story rather than necessarily the gameplay. And then that kind of helped like go back and forth in that sort of way. So, because that for us was pretty important. Like I'm a big Dark Souls fan. We both love Hollow Knight with like that storytelling that's like, not that this is going to be as obtuse as Hollow Knight or Dark Souls, but like the fact that there's a lot of environmental storytelling in those games, that's something that we also want to eventually have in. So that's part of why we're coming up with like so much detail in the way we write our backgrounds to stuff, is so we can put those little details in, whether they're explained or not for the player fully, there really is a reason why it's there.
Maybe at some point you could share your internal wiki with fans so that they can really dig into all the lore, or even include like a little manual or lore booklet with the physical edition of the game. That'd be a cool throwback.
Like an art
I really
book,
want us to have people theorize about things and like write it down.
Yeah.
And that way we can look at it and be like, let's see what the official, like, Ophidian booklet says here. They're close. Let's see if they can find it, like.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea. For me, it's like doing sort of like the Dark Souls way, in the sense of well, if we release an art book, let's say, which for Kickstarter we would probably do, maybe we have like little lore tidbits in the art book to go along with some of the art that you drew, Alan.
I knew nothing
But then,
about
like,
this, Dave. What are you talking about?
I just cut it off the
You're
top of my
loading
head.
in the middle of the interview. You're going to unload this on me. You know?
Yeah.
Sorry.
But the point is, like, as Alan was saying, like, it's not letting everything out, because part of what's so fun about those games is people getting to speculate about things. I mean, look, I don't know if our game will ever get big enough either way, that like there's that many people being like, oh, like, what about this? Is this here? I don't know if we're going to get a moss bag of ChivalBee. I don't know if it's that type of game, but like,
That'd be funny.
or Vadi of ChivalBee. But, it's like, it's still fun to have that where people can theorize things and you're not just handing everybody everything on a silver platter. It's like, yeah, it's there for a reason. To me, that's more fulfilling in a way. I think that's why I like Dark Souls so much when I first played it before I knew the lore. Was even though I didn't understand why anything was anywhere, it felt like it should be there. It felt like there was a reason for everything. And I think that adds a lot, even if you don't know why.
Well, you never know what kind of fan base ChivalBee might attract, but with its fun mascot vibe, I can totally see people making fan art and little 3D models and...
Did somebody say fan art?
I just want to write to Rule 34.
No, that's actually one of the if we want to talk like design direction a little bit, that is actually one of the things that I was very cognizant of whenever I was designing anything in ChivalBee, is how replicable is this if you kind of know how to draw. And so everything that you look, all the characters and everything follow very simple. Like I think to draw Bombus, who is Busby's older brother, the big one with the big sword, it's like a 12-step. Like I could put it in like an art book and have you like be able to recreate that exact picture. And so part of my process whenever I'm designing the characters and everything in there is basically for people who want to draw these characters to be able to draw them. It should be fairly easy because it's all using pretty simple geometric shapes and it's part of the process. So I'm trying to make sure that it's something that people can actually to do regardless of their skill level. I would love to see Busby fan art or ChivalBee fan art. So the game was called Project Busby for like the longest time, and so it's still like in our heads. So if you hear us say Busby, it's because of that.
Name, right?
Well, it's also the character's name. So I mean,
yeah, it's the character's
his
name.
But yeah, I mean, like it's still called in Unity Busby. So because that was just like the Unity project when we started it. So.
Well, my next question, music and sound effects are almost as important for setting the mood as the story and gameplay itself. How and when does the audio aspect take place in your process?
Yeah, the current kind of way that we're having it set up is I will create. We have a handful of like placeholder just assets for sounds just to throw something in there, but there are a few sounds that we needed to do that were custom. And that would be things like the boss at the end of the prologue. The dive sound is another one. There's a few other sounds in there. But basically the way that it's going right now is I'll put either these quick placeholder custom sounds or placeholder like just stock sounds in there. And they are labeled in the game as placeholders. So there's essentially going to be like a big sound audit whenever we get to that part, which is essentially like, I don't know what sounds need to be in the game yet because we haven't built all the levels out. So there might be a level that's, got a certain sound or thing in it that's used here. But that same sound could be used in other places. So we're kind of looking at like the scalability of making a sound. And once you have like the whole picture, like holistically, you can start going like, all right, where do we need this type of sound, this type of sound? Where can we kind of reuse sounds or alter them? Kind of like a hue shift on like an enemy, but for sound, if you want to think of it that way. And that's going to be something that will come around towards I don't know exactly when, but maybe like 80% through the game's development, we'd probably go through and start refining that sound aspect to it. So,
yeah, I mean, we also purchased a sound effect library that we can use. So, I mean, like there might be, I'm sure there'll be sounds that were like, yeah, that's good. That we might stick with.
Yeah. That's what I meant by stock sounds. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then as far as music goes, we're currently talking with someone who's think, set to do the music for us. So, but we're so far out from releasing the game at this point that it's like he's going through the process with us, like kind of like we meet with him, we go over like different areas for how the sound should feel and his own process for doing it. But you know, that's like it's something where like that's where the bulk of our money is going to go from a Kickstarter. So it's one of those things where like he's starting his pre-production phase, but until we do like a trailer or something like that, and we're starting to pay him for that, it's just like a pre-production phase for that point. So right now we're just using stock music for the time being until then.
Yeah, and we're pretty excited about who we have on board for this too. He's worked on some pretty worldwide recognizable games, so that's the other reason why. Like, if it was somebody who like we were just like, yeah, it's a friend of mine, I would have no problem throwing the name out. But right now, until we get like an official like, all right, I'm writing music for you guys, here it is, basically. Then we're kind of like we're holding back on saying who it is, but we're very,
it's at a
very
point
excited.
where it's like pretty official, but yeah, it's like
I want to hear him be like, what do you think of this sample? I want that first before I say it.
That's not going to happen for another few years, but like, yeah. Point is, I mean, like we meet with him regularly. I think he said he's on board, but just in case.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a side thought here, but from each of your perspective roles, what's something you thought would be easy, but quickly learned that it wasn't? Alan, you first.
For me, it's probably because what I do on the game is primarily animations and art and everything. The thing that I think that I underestimated was how nitpicky pixel art is. And earlier I said, or however you splice this, at one point in this interview, I said that a single pixel could mess up the whole thing. And that's not an understatement. It's very pixel perfect. And there's all kinds of other little things too when it comes to pixel art. Like there's these things called jaggies, which is if you make a diagonal line and it kind of makes like an uneven pattern. There's all kinds of just weird things when it comes to how specific and precision based like the pixel animations need to be. Even things like color color and movement, I would say. So if you want to make sure that something's readable against a certain background or a certain character, you have to make sure like everything works. And that's, part of like typical visual language stuff. You want to have readability and all that. But again, with the level of granularity with pixel art, it's like having a single pixel show, like if an arm moves this way and there's like a pixel showing like right here, you're going to see that. And so even though anatomically it might not make sense to remove that, visually having a single pixel stick out because Busby's stinger's moving that way or whatever, you erase the stinger for just that frame and then you can pull it back in. So there's like sometimes where I have to like, we'll call it like break the model to make the animation make sense so it's more readable or to reduce like noise that doesn't really feed into like the animation's purpose.
Gotcha.
So I guess for my end, I think it's the level of granularity that I didn't think about going into it. Like things that I kind of mentioned in my video that you saw, but like the fact that like I never really thought about VFX before to any extent because it's just kind of a component that's there when you play a game unless they make a big deal out of it. It's just sort of like their thing that it makes it feel good, but you don't really think about it, right? So it's like, oh crap, we have to think about the VFX. And not only that, but it was more complex than I realized too. Like every lecture I was finding for VFX was how do you make a VFX appear? And I would place it in the middle of the character. And I found like, wait, it's a way more complex for the game to figure out where is the strike happening exactly? Like where's your sword touching the enemy? Because really the hitbox could be huge. For like the sword hitbox is big. The enemy, the hitbox is this. So it's like, okay, where is it determining that the sword is hitting it? And then like placing it in the proper spot. So I had like placing on the edge of the enemy properly because everything was like about how to place in the center of the enemy. And then also like, oh, well, we have a diagonal strike. So should we change this to like, oh, there's a diagonal VFX that's coming out as opposed to just a down one or this one or What about a shield VFX versus like a normal hit VFX? So it's like that kind of like level of granularity. Or when he hits the ground, for example, when he drills the ground, Alan threw out like, oh, it would probably feel better if a little bit of dirt clump popped out of the ground when he drills and hits the ground.
Yeah.
And I was like,
prior
or
to
like
that,
if he hits a wall.
He would drill straight down into the ground and then just be standing. And I was like, I mean, we wanted to have like I said, everything needs to have mass, right? Volume. So having him have a little dirt like plop, come up, if he goes straight down at an angle, it kind of shoots out at an angle. That's what he was talking about. That was the reason for it though. It just felt really weird going like high speed drill into the ground and then standing.
And look, like a lot of those old NES games would have done that, but that's not what this is. We want it to be elevated.
And
as soon as he said that, I was like, as soon as he threw that out there, I'm like, crap, you're right. It would be better if we did that. So it's like, okay, now I have to figure out anytime he drills, where in the tile set is he hitting? Which tile is he hitting? Where on the tile is he hitting it? And then the top of the tile specifically, make sure it's like properly, if he's drilling down, like where that part would be, because again, the hitbox is bigger than where the drill visually would be. So it's that. But what if, and this is a big what if when he does a diagonal strike, he's partially hitting the ground, but partially not touching the ground when he hits. So how do I properly place the dirt when he hits diagonally? And so it reads it, so it's hitting in the right spot of that. And like it's those like little things like edges and corners that can just like make things go just like, it's just like, yeah, it can be super frustrating. Edges and corners. And the fact that we did a diagonal and a big mechanic of him is a stupid diagonal. It's been the bane of my coding existence because every problem stems from his 45-degree angle diagonal strike for everything. There's always some sort of issue with that. So I guess that's really what I'm realizing is the biggest like thing I didn't think about when we first started was how much of a pain in the ass the 45-degree angle attack would be. That's been like the bane of every single problem I've had with this game, programming was. Little
did he know, I am also the bane of his existence when it comes to this, because it's my job to look at things and go like, what would look really cool here? And then Dave's already just like, numbers, equations.
And every single what if is like hours and hours of work.
That's true.
But every time he does it, he's right. I'm like, oh crap, that would make it better. I should do that. So
Dave's just like in recovery from the last thing that he put in, and I'm just like, actually, I had this dream, and then he's just like, oh my god, and then like he'll hear the idea, and he's just like, that does sound fun, like through tears. Yeah, the other thing about it too was that we stuck with the original idea was to avoid having people have to stop and wait a lot. So like one of the things that I was trying to make sure that we did was it felt like it made sense in the world, but we also have to balance it with like, yeah, it might make sense that he walks into a door and like it opens and closes or whatever. But as a player, you're going to be like, all right, I got to wait for this stupid door animation again. And it doesn't really, again, like, does it serve a purpose? And the answer to that is really no. So the way that we have things kind of set up now, which is the original idea, is very similar to, I guess, Shovel Knight, where you just kind of walk it straight and then like the facade of a building disappears and then now you're in it.
I don't know if they did the facade thing in Shovel Knight. So
you're right.
Props
I don't think
to us for doing the facade.
Yeah.
We're so cool.
The idea though is that you just kind of like, you just go left and you're in the building now. And if you keep going left, you're out of the building. And the idea of keeping that alive in our game was really centered around just making sure that as you're traversing through the town, you don't have to stop. You could just burn through a building basically by dashing constantly and get to the other side of it if you really wanted to. But there's no point where you have to like stop.
Yeah, it's like that. And also just for the sake of like, okay, we're doing a 2D town. Like it seemed like it would be more fun to feel like you're still in a level in a way as opposed to somewhere else. Like, like a JRPG, you go to a town, it's like safe zone, it's different. And then you go into dungeon, it's like you're in dungeon mode. But I think it's fun with 2D platform games when you go to a town and you're still playing 2D platform game. There's just characters there. So that's also why we're debating back and forth. Can you attack the NPCs? Can you hit them? So
yeah, it was like a cascade of decision making. It was actually kind of interesting because the first one came back to like, well, can you attack in a town? And then we're like, well, let's say no, hypothetically.
Right.
Well, okay, well, what can you do in the town? Well, I guess talk to people. Well, that's not very fun. So we'll keep the ability to attack things, because what if you want to break some crates or something? All right, so we could have like the bouncing off of things back end here now. So you could drill down into things and bounce off of buildings. And we're like, okay, so now you can have like a little bit of parkour in the town. Well, what if you accidentally attack an NPC? And that's what Dave was talking about, was like, all right, well, if you use your melee, which is like square or whatever, you could be outside of talking range, and so you'll still swing the sword. And so one of the ideas that I had was, what if he like goes to pull out his sword, and then he looks at the camera and is like, whoops. And it's kind of funny. But then I also thought, I was like, well, every single time that you're just slightly out of range, Busby's going to stop, go through this animation, and the player's going to have to wait for it, and it's going to get old real fast. And so we were like, all right, we'll just have him go through the attack. And we're like, should the NPCs react to it? And the ultimate decision was, yeah, it makes it fun when they're just like, whoa, what are you doing?
Yeah, you get like a fun reaction. So yeah, I mean, that's why I guess if you've been watching my Mega Man breakdowns, that's why now I'm much more, hopefully more objective when I look at like what they were doing, or I try to think about it from their perspective of like, okay, like there's this large decision process that goes through. So even if you don't like something, obviously there's a reason they decided to do it or they tried it. So yeah, like the large decision tree process for a lot of things.
So, next question. Are there any newer AI-powered tools or procedural generation techniques that have shifted how you tackle certain parts of development?
On the visual side, we did use it once in the early phase of the development of the game, and that was used as sort of like I would say it was used more like a very specific Google image search. So rather than looking up ideas and references on Google Images and trying to find things, or using Pinterest or something like that, it was very easy to just go like, I'm looking for this, and then it just gives you like this ton of different versions and variations of something that you were looking for. So it has been used that way, but it's kind of more just like a mood board inspiration kind of thing, as opposed to going through like a Google Images or Pinterest or something. There is not a single part of the game that has been designed visually. And I think with code as well, everything's handwritten by Dave. So like there's not any kind of AI generated or procedurally generated anything in the game. And I'm very happy to say that.
Yeah, I think like at one point we were curious, before we fleshed out the story and figured it out, we were like, oh, maybe like the enemy is going to be bears, like honey bears or something like that, right? Because honey.
Yes, I remember
no
that,
bears in the game. Now, no bears in the game. But like, so we were like, oh, what would like an evil honey bear look like? And there's like nothing. So we're just searching like bears covered in honey, evil, and like a Gen AI thing to just for like inspiration of like, what would that look like? Before Alan would draw something, and we didn't end up going with that anyway. But like that's like one idea, like example. But yeah, Alan, all the concepts, like as you've seen, all the concept art iterations, like they're like, it might be like that inspiration initially. It'd be like, oh, what are some ideas to just draw inspiration from? And then Alan just goes and makes something wholly original from that.
He goes.
But as far as as far as programming goes, I haven't used any AI tools. I'm not necessarily against for programming using something like Claude, which is actually my brother works at Anthropic, but which makes the Claude AI, which is like is very good for programming. I'm not necessarily against it because like, I mean, at the end of the day, like for programming, it's not like there's no artistic element to it. For me, at least, it's like, okay, if I'm going to write this state, I know what it needs to do. I just need to write it. But I feel like for me, because I'm still in the, like, I've been learning in a sense and teaching myself Unity. I feel like those tools are better when you have a really good understanding of it already. So then it's more of an aid to what you're already doing to speed up what you're already doing, as opposed to writing everything. Because like, I felt like if I use something like an AI tool right now to program something for me, I'd have to be like, okay, how does it incorporate into my code? If something's broken and I have to debug it, because if I don't understand how the AI is working or the code itself, I probably won't understand how to debug it. And something that most of what I do is debugging, maybe because I didn't use AI, but like, I don't know. But like most of what I'm doing is debugging. Like I'll write a code and sure, it might take me a while, but then like a bug could take me months and months to figure out how to debug. And if it's my own code, it's a lot easier for me to sift through it or to debug it or be like, oh, maybe if I check this area, this might be where it is. This is how I wrote this. This is what's linking to that thing. Anyways, all that's to say, I don't use it, but I'm not necessarily against it for programming and coding specifically. If it's something like artistic and original like that, that's creative, like we don't have any of it, and we're against that. So,
Well, let's talk platforms. Where and when do you see the game launching, and is there a process you're using to make sure that it can translate easily across different platforms?
we're hoping to release it on everything. That's the dream and the goal. So it'd be like, okay, Switch 2, PS5, the Xbox Series X or whatever's out at the time we finish the game, Steam. A lot of it is going to be a matter of, to my understanding, getting a hold of dev kits. So that's part of what we're going to be putting into when we do a Kickstarter. Basically, the way we're looking at a Kickstarter is money to fund dev kits and music, and that's it. Hopefully everything else between the two of us, we covered on our own. It's just dev kits and music. So that's the hope. It's something that's a lot further down the process than where we're at. I program and I use Unity on a Mac. Alan's using a PC. So I'm kind of hoping the fact that the way that I'm coding things, it has to work on both Mac and PC, and we're constantly testing on them both because we're on two different platforms. I'm naturally coding it in a way that works more universally on different platforms. But, there's certain things that I'm starting to learn about, like, okay, these are things I have to watch out for when we go platform specific. I'm like saving and loading is an example where I think I'd have to really figure out platform specific stuff. But that's something where we're at and the phase we're at is something where we haven't had to think about too much yet. It's also helpful we're using something like Unity. Like Unity has ways to export things for various platforms, and it has a lot of code that you can do where it's like, I can write an if statement in Unity that's very specifically only Unity understands. It's like, if it's going to be on PC, do this code. If it's going to be on PS5, do this code. If it's going to be on this, do this code. So there's that sort of thing too that I can write into the code.
Are there other game ideas quietly cooking in the background? And if so, have you been cross-pollinating ideas like sharing mechanics or story elements between ChivalBee and any other potential projects?
If we go back to the very beginning, the dawn of Ophidian, back when it was potentially like Great Ore Games and what was that other one? We had another one that was like a circle. Omnisoft. Yeah. So if we go back to those days, our first prototype that we did was a horizontal shooter, and like a shoot 'em up, and through Dave's lectures, he was like, hey, I got this idea, because he was working on roguelites and like level generators and stuff like that. And we're like, well, all right, well, what if we could kind of tie that prototype in with this roguelike idea? And now we have like this idea for, this shoot 'em up that has, roguelike elements and stuff like that. So that was one that kind of came back from the graveyard, so to speak. And
that's cool.
Was like, this might be a fun game to do, so there's that one. And we've also kind of talked about, just because we have to, like, what if we did do a sequel to ChivalBee? Like, what's that going to be like? And so we've got some ideas of how the gameplay would change and things like that have we've lightly discussed, not in great detail or anything, but
there's both of our dream is to make a Metroidvania one day, and there's like a concept that Alan had way back when we first started, when like ChivalBee was just going to be a prototype. We're like, okay, the dream is to get to this concept that Alan had for Metroidvania, which was pretty original and unique that we hadn't seen. So probably at some point do that. My dream is to make like a Kingsfield-like someday type of game, but it's like, we only have so much time. So like, it's like right now it's ChivalBee, and maybe like, oh, this seems like a cool mechanic. Maybe that worked for something else. Or as Alan said, the shooting game is probably the most likely one, because it's something because a lot of the times he's working on art assets, and sometimes that can take so long to do, and maybe I don't have something I have to debug, or there's a system that I'm going to wait on to write until we're a little further on. It's something where I could be starting to work on something like a roguelike that's probably a lot more programming heavy once I feel comfortable and ready for that point. So.
All right, well, I'll start wrapping things up here. Thank you both again for taking the time to chat. If you're watching and want to keep up with what Alan, Dave, and Ophidian Interactive are working on, be sure to follow them on all of their social media and YouTube. All of those links will be down in the description. And before we officially call it, I've got one last question for both of you. What's your go-to game soundtrack to listen to while you work?
I love the Hollow Knight soundtrack. So that one, I mean, I've been learning that on piano. So I'd say Hollow Knight's one. I have like a mix of video game remixes that I go through. So like Chrono Trigger, Hollow Knight. I like Final Fantasy 7 and 8's music a lot, and 6, but I don't listen to 6 very much, even though I like that music. A lot of JRPG stuff. But I think Hollow Knight's a big one that I've been listening to a lot.
Yeah, that's a good question. I as you can see, I'm like really mulling this one around. Okay, so I have a playlist that I've created over time of just games that I played. I like their soundtracks, and I just want to have like a little bit of everything, and I'll usually shuffle that. But I guess more recently, the soundtrack that pops up a lot for me, surprisingly, maybe to some, is the Stellar Blade soundtrack. If you haven't heard it, it's a pretty solid soundtrack. And so it's got a lot of great like different moods, and some of it's pretty easy listening, some of it's really intense, and it's one of a few soundtracks at this moment in time where, as I'm going through my custom playlist, when one of the songs come up, I'm like, I will not skip on that one. We'll listen to that one. Yeah, so there's that. There's, of course, I'm a Final Fantasy historian. I have all of the Ultimanias over here to my right, and I have the Zelda arts and artifacts and Historia and all that stuff. So yeah, Zelda, Final Fantasy, Castlevania, got to have that one in there. But yeah, so but yeah, that's gonna be my answer to that.
Honestly, usually what I listen to is I just like look up relaxing video game music mix or like medley or something like that. So I'll just listen to like chill music when I'm working, and it could be any game, even when I haven't played. But I'm like, okay, if it's like something more relaxing, that's my go-to search more than anything else. I like my chill music, chill or moody atmospheric music. Yeah, video games and chill.
Thanks again, guys, and for everyone out there watching, make sure to hit the like button, leave some ChivalBee love down in the comments. If you're not subscribed and you'd like to see more design-focused gaming content, be sure to subscribe for more. And as always, I really appreciate you all taking the time to watch. We'll see you next time.
So you never even watched the Castlevania video. You're like, whatever, Castlevania video. This guy has views. Let's see if they'll post it.
I did watch it. That's all.
I want to circle back to that.
I wouldn't have just put it on anyone's. I watched it.
You're like, what?
Hey,
crap, whatever. It has like 20,000 views. Like, let's see if it'll let me post it. Sub for sub.
right.